Welcome, everyone, to my fireside chat with Dan Garfield. Dan is the Chief Open Source Officer, the co-founder of Codefresh, a fantastic, rapidly growing company where they're positioned is at the intersection of GitOps, of cloud, of Kubernetes, and they have these fantastic tools, a wonderful program used by developers and organizations across the globe to help in their GitOps strategy, to help them deploy this very powerful platform. What I've asked Dan in his comments here is just to give a brief high-level view of Codefresh. Again, a rapidly growing organization. Ask him to comment in a little bit more detail about GitOps. Codefresh, and Dan specifically, is playing a leading role in formalizing GitOps as an organizational philosophy, as an industry-wide standard for helping modernize and facilitate the development of applications. I think that'll be really interesting. And then in the third part, I'm going to ask Dan to talk about Codefresh's ability to support and accelerate continuous delivery. In the traditional programming application world, you've got the developers on one side, the programmers. On the other side, you've got the security operation folks. If you look at those two parties are all part of the traditional DevOps acronyms. And people used to think, well, I like stability. I'm worried about security. We can't release so many applications so quickly. And there's been this tension, so to speak, because so many developers wanting to support their line of businesses, they want to get the latest and greatest out there. And one of the things, and I've seen this at many Angel Bee programs, the cool thing that people talk about Codefresh is by utilizing their platform, the developers can deliver their applications faster. And by leveraging Codefresh, it can actually make those applications more secure. So it's really a whole new mindset that everyone needs to be aware of, that security is not enhanced by delaying updates. It's improved when you can get the latest and greatest application with new enhancements out there as fast as possible. And the great thing about Codefresh is they let you do that in a very fast, secure, and cost-effective way. The other thing you want to keep in mind from a performance standpoint, as so many people are worried and concerned, rightly so, about their SLAs, how the performance might impact internal users or external customers. Again, the great thing about Codefresh and its ability to support GitOps and continuous delivery is that your applications will perform better the faster you can update them. So let me ask Dan now to just give a little background on himself, what led him to found Codefresh, and then talk about some general concepts around GitOps, its emergence as an industry standard, why security is included within the GitOps framework, and then go into a little more detail and customer examples. How's that sound, Dan?
Sure, yeah, sounds good.
All right, all yours.
So yeah, we'll get into the GitOps and the security side of it, but to introduce myself, I come from a background where I was a full stack engineer for a long time and spent a lot of time on the business side because frankly I'm not as good as good of a programmer as I wish I was. But yeah, we launched Codefresh about 5 or 6 years ago, and our goal was really we want to enable people to deploy software more often, and we want to be able to take advantage of containerization. We want to be able to take advantage of Kubernetes and all these cloud native, methodologies that are coming out, and that's grown really well. We've been really happy about that. We're on 4 continents now. We've got offices in Mountain View, in Salt Lake, in Israel. We've got offices in Europe. And most of the team is distributed on top of that. So the growth has been excellent. We've got an amazing set of customers, some of the largest retailers in the world, some of the largest media companies in the world. Most of the people that enjoyed the Olympics this last recently was actually software that's built and deployed using Codefresh. So I actually feel like most people are already using Codefresh. Some of the most popular video games in the world are actually powered by software that's built and deployed using Codefresh. So it's cool to know that. We've got healthcare customers, banking customers. And what we launched last year was our GitOps offering. And this is all powered by Argo, which is the open source implementation of, basically, we built an enterprise version of Argo CD for our GitOps offering. And to offer better support for scale, for security, and then of course just actually having a support team that can help you make sure that things are getting deployed correctly. And that's exploded. It's completely taken over, and we're seeing it being used in the cloud. We're seeing it being used on-prem, and we're seeing it used at edge. So like some of the healthcare use cases are at edge, and that has been really powerful because the GitOps paradigm completely changes the way that we interact with software deployment from a security perspective, not only deploying faster and more often, but in a traditional kind of CD world, you would need to open up ports, and you need to have a way of like creating secure network connections going out to all of your deployment areas. And with Codefresh GitOps, we operate off of a pull model instead. So you have the GitOps agent, the GitOps operator sitting on your infrastructure. Again, that could be at edge, that could be on-prem, that could be in the cloud, it could be in virtual private networks. And then it is seeking out and pulling the updates onto it. And then we're providing a sort of control plane so that you can actually view and manage all of that scale. And this is a different kind of scale. We support scale where, hey, I've just got a ton of servers to support capacity. That's the kind of scale that we support. We also support that sprawl, that horizontal scaling where I have 5,000 sites and each of them is their own network, and I need a way to manage the deployment of the software on all of those sites, all those Kubernetes clusters that are sitting out there from a central location, and be able to visually understand what's going on. And there's a regression, and I can see what caused it and where it came from and who worked on it. And that kind of visibility is pretty critical at enterprise scale. So that's where we focus as a company, and that's what's powered a lot of our growth. And we're growing far beyond. I had some goals in mind when we launched the company for where I thought we could get in terms of valuation and revenue and things. And we've surpassed all those things. And so now it's like, okay, what's the next vision? So now we're actually looking, thinking a lot bigger than we have in the past.
It's interesting because as you describe that, I imagine the management of IT organizations improving these POs probably love it because as organizations are sprawling, growing so rapidly, going in the cloud, you've got these huge global companies, they're going, wow, this is really good. I've got a consistent platform that gives me visibility. I don't have any siloed little isolated islands. I can make sure everyone's developing using the right protocols. And then the great thing for the developers is they're probably jazzed because, wow, I can do it today and it's right up there tonight. I can see my work so quickly. And then the other piece, again, the operation security side are probably pumped because suddenly there's not any shadow IT releasing apps that aren't necessarily vetted with the right security parameters. So you're really supporting, again, the development side, the operational side, and then the management side to make, again, hearing you describe it, it's not surprising to me you're growing so fast because you've got the three decision makers in a group, the programmers, the security people, and the people signing the POs, all jazzed about Codefresh.
Yeah, the creation and adoption of microservices has really been great for Codefresh because when you adopt microservices, of course, you can have better scale in your development. You have better scale in your applications. You have a better way of building software. And Amazon taught us all that, 20 years ago when they started doing that model. But then as organizations grow and suddenly you have 10,000 microservices, suddenly it starts to feel like chaos. And that's when something like Codefresh can come in and it's like, okay, well, we can actually make sense of all this and help you really bring order to your deployment process, create a scalable way, a standardized way of doing this that is going to bring clarity and bring control back in so that it's not total chaos. You can actually see what's going on and track it down. Yeah.
Got it. Now, the other thing is you've referenced a lot of this innovative application world, cloud, Kubernetes, microservices, et cetera, as we were talking previously, for some of the major organizations out there, some of the biggest media companies, they still have a fair amount of on-prem legacy apps that may not have migrated to the cloud yet. Is Codefresh also applicable, some of the mindset that the CIO can say, even though these apps aren't are not cloud ready today, I still want you to use the Codefresh methodology as a company-wide standard. Is that another functionality too?
Yeah, most of our customers come to us because they're using Kubernetes, they're using microservices, and they want the latest best practice way of deploying software that takes advantage of all of those cloud native primitives. But then they look around and they say, well, I do have a bunch of traditional stuff. Can I still support that? And yeah, we do support that. That's not that's not necessarily our focus. Our focus is the cloud native set, the microservices. But we have a lot of customers that are doing traditional style, CD pipeline deployments. And there's still a lot of advantages to using Codefresh in those scenarios, even though we do really focus on the cloud native tool set.
Since that is your focus, and all the major cloud providers, the big three, AWS, Microsoft, and GCP, all have major Kubernetes initiatives. Can you describe how Codefresh works? Let's say if you've got a multi-cloud environment, you may be using some apps are running on AWS, and some might be running on GCP, and some on Azure. Do you provide, I don't really like this term, but it may be applicable, like almost a single pane of glass to manage your applications regardless of the cloud platform in use?
Yeah, and this is actually kind of an interesting shift in architecture, because the way that people used to solve this is, I want to deploy to this thing, so I don't want to open up an external connection that can, go into that network and talk to my production. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy an instance of some on-prem software onto that network. And then I'll configure that in order to deploy to. But then you very rapidly end up with, okay, I've got 50,000 Jenkins instances. And now I've introduced a problem because 90% of them have like unpatched vulnerabilities sitting on them. So I was trying to solve a security problem when I did it this way, but I've actually created some other security problems and just some management overhead problems where it's like, okay, I've got more instances than I have engineers, and how do I even manage that? And so one of the things that we do with Codefresh is by using this GitOps model, we have this GitOps operator. You deploy that as a component within your infrastructure. You don't have to open up the firewall for incoming connections, but it can essentially passively call to the control plane. And again, that could be self-hosted. That most people choose to just use the Codefresh cloud because the way it's architected, all of the private information, any code or whatever, that stuff stays on the customer's infrastructure. And so the control plane is in some ways almost trustless because we're not getting any data back out that you wouldn't want, leaving your network. So that control plane allows you to look and say, okay, well, I have these applications deployed on Google Cloud and Amazon and Azure and on-prem, and this one's deployed on my laptop, and this one's deployed in this convenience store or this shop, providing services. But the status of all of them is viewable from a single pane of glass, as you said. And if I have a regression or something, I can pull a window and say my regression started during this time period. Here's all the deployments that happened during that time period. And that's especially critical when you're dealing with microservices because a regression in one microservice can sometimes show up as errors in a different microservice. And so you might say oh, well, this one wasn't even updated. It just suddenly started failing. Why did that happen? Well, let's look at the window. Oh, okay, well, there was a deployment to this service, and here's the Jira ticket that was being worked on when it was deployed. Oh, would definitely be related and potentially cause an issue. Let's do a remediation. Let's do a rollback. And you can have automated rollbacks too. Sometimes people prefer those to be manual, but we can do both. And so yeah, that architectural difference of having a GitOps agent, a GitOps operator that's essentially co-located with your deployment infrastructure changes already the entire scope of the security challenges you would deal with. It makes it much simpler.
Got it. So if I'm listening to this and I'm a CISO, my next step should be, okay, I need to use this, and I'm assuming that you're just an overlay. You're not going to really if at all, reduce the performance of your existing security apparatus, firewalls, malware detection, all of those kind of solutions, but you work hand in hand with them to make sure that vulnerabilities tied to your applications are identified and fixed quicker. Is that, if I'm putting myself...
Yeah, and I would say it even goes beyond that, because you have, from a process standpoint, in Codefresh, you can create a sort of security policies and say, like, I only want to deploy containers that have been scanned, for example, and have met this vulnerability threshold. Okay. And so if they don't meet that, that would be not meet the policy, and those deployments would be rejected. And so you can have these kind of security gates as part of your process. And this is normally like a DevSecOps thing. But GitOps also is interesting because you can do drift detection. So like we're looking at production, and GitOps, and this goes to the principles of GitOps, but GitOps basically deals with a desired state that you should have defined and immutable and versioned and should be declarative and all these things. But this desired state is going to be constantly compared against the actual state. So when you have the GitOps operator that's sitting co-located with your production infrastructure, it's looking at production and it's saying, there is some drift that has occurred. There's a change in the configuration. There's a different container deployed. This is not what's defined in the desired state. And of course, this is an optional thing, but in general, we recommend this. That drift has been detected. And so I'm going to take the desired state and I'm going to apply that to my actual state. Now, what that could mean is that in practice, that could mean somebody gained unauthorized access to your production, made some changes, and then it was detected and remediated immediately. So that issue that potentially left things open can be remediated instantly and automatically because it drifts. It has a difference from your desired state.
So if you have a scenario, let's say, again, I'm part of the IT security team, I need to make sure my application team is using Codefresh. I can work with them to make sure those filters, those trigger mechanisms are correctly configured. And the great thing about that, as you said, it's almost analogous, let's say, a zero-day attack, but from the software side, because they see an immediate change, as you said, in the preferred permanent status that's identified in the GitOps standard, so to speak. Your application, based on the combined efforts of the security team, the application team, they'll solve that right away and prevent a zero-day attack. I'm throwing around a pure security term, but it seems to be applicable in this instance in terms of almost eliminating that vulnerability window when something isn't ideal, and thereby reinforces the value of Codefresh in supporting the development team and the security team to work harmoniously and not at odds with each other.
Yeah. I mean, from like a bullet point standpoint, it's like, okay, we're worried about security. One, if I adopt GitOps and Codefresh is an implementation of GitOps, I will reduce my attack surface immediately because I can use this pull version of deployment instead of a push version of deployment. So that changes how I deal with networking and open up ports and all those kinds of things. I can just close a lot of the potential openings in the attack surface that would exist. And then two, I can do drift detection, so I can catch vulnerabilities in real time, or I can catch issues in real time and have them remediated and keep the state always as what has been declared. I also have some better security gates because I have ways of enforcing that as part of my deployment process. So, and I also reduce the issues of like a potential bad actor in the middle, because GitOps also requires that this is essentially operated in a closed loop. So nobody is manually connecting to the production infrastructure. They're just making a change to the desired state of the system, and the GitOps operator is picking that up and deploying it. So most downtime that occurs happens, frankly, because of people connected directly to systems, and they factoring a change, they don't test something, whatever, and this causes downtime. Amazon's largest outage of all time was caused by this. Cloudflare's just a year or two ago was caused by this. It's a very common issue. And those introduce security vulnerabilities too, because you have to have developers or operators that have keys to production. Well, you don't have to do that as much with GitOps because you have the operator doing that. The other thing is, from a time perspective, and this is something you mentioned, security often has been viewed as we have to be preventing things from making it into production. And that is true when it comes to like somebody makes a change and it introduces a vulnerability. But the biggest issue, that's actually not the most common security problem. The most common security problem is you already deployed the thing that's insecure. And this is true of everybody. If you have software running, you have vulnerabilities that exist. Sure. We don't know what those vulnerabilities are. Maybe nobody's found them yet. But if Unix can have a vulnerability allowing people to gain root access in production for 12 years, and that's a real thing. I can't remember exactly how long it was sitting there, but this is a real thing. Like, you already have vulnerabilities deployed today.
Yeah.
Luckily, nobody knows about them, but at some point they will learn about them, right? And we're going to have a security alert. And now, does your process support, and does it enable a way of people to actually deploy the new version of that's patched version of that software right away? Well, GitOps really makes that a lot easier because we've reduced the overhead. The cost to do a deployment is reduced so much, and the automation takes care of so much that your engineers and your DevOps engineers are freed up so they can focus on other things. That getting those changes out quickly, that's actually the security imperative, right? And one of the issues that security teams have is when they do get one of these security alerts, it's like, okay, we need to patch the software, drop everything and let's do it. And I've talked to teams that are like, hey, we were able to drop everything and get a remediation deployed within 24 hours. We're really proud of that. Yeah. And that's legit. I mean, that's something to be proud of. Okay. But that's
still a full day window for hackers and bad things to happen.
Well, and it's also a hit on your productivity because you basically stopped the train to deal with this. But if as part of your process, and if you adopted GitOps and you've got all the automation there, then making a change like that and having to go through testing and having to get it deployed, that can be a much more mundane standard task rather than a stop all the trains and let's deal with it. People are superheroes. They work really hard. They solve this stuff. It's amazing. But wouldn't it be great if you could adopt a system that didn't require you to be a superhero every day? That would be better.
So I think this is really impactful. And I've learned something new here because when you use Codefresh, your code's more secure, your code is better, it's out there faster. And the other big thing, and we know there's so many labor shortages for the right kind of programmers, for the right kind of security professionals. The thing I want to emphasize before I may ask you to give some concluding comments on GitOps is the value of Codefresh for technology teams who probably have all these open recs to hire this developer or try and hire this security professional. I think one of the powerful things that everyone watching this video needs to recognize is suddenly your team can do more because they're not tied up with fixing stuff. They're not tied up in cumbersome approval processes. So much is just done through the Codefresh platform that you're not taking up time, manpower, money, et cetera, doing things that it's all part of this process. And I think as people look at changing, as people look at, there's a big redeployment of labor within IT with so much of infrastructure and networking and endpoint management getting more centralized. So many more network configuration activities are being absorbed by the cloud providers as applications go from being hosted on-prem to hosted in the cloud. I think that's a very powerful benefit as everyone is looking out there saying, suddenly, if I've got, a large corporation, I got 50 developers, suddenly by using Codefresh, their productivity goes up by 20%. So I really have 60 developers because 20% one day a week, if they're only working 5 days a week, which most developers don't. But let's take that as an example. If they're doing 1 day a week on just stuff, wouldn't you rather have all of your developers just program all the time using the right platform and just get it out there and know it works? That's very powerful. Anyhow, you can make some concluding comments, and I'm especially interested maybe if you give me some, and our viewers, some insights into the GitOps standardization. What's the time frame for this becoming a more formalized industry-wide standard? And I think the other great thing about Codefresh, I know your title's been enhanced as a Chief Open Source Officer. If you look at what Codefresh is doing with regard to Argo and Kubernetes, all these open source standards, it's another reason why I imagine organizations are using Codefresh, because when you're using open stack, open source software, you can use Codefresh, and your ability is just to make that open source solution that so many people are using just work that much better, more securely. Anyhow, let me turn it over to you to make some concluding comments on why people should use Codefresh if I didn't do a good enough job, and also give a little better sense of the GitOps standardization.
Yeah, to iterate on the GitOps standardization, the GitOps working group is something that we at Codefresh launched with, we teamed up with Weaveworks, GitHub, Azure, AWS, to launch this as a standard, basically almost a year ago. Well, okay. Yeah, end of 2020. And the goal was we want to come up with all the best practices, make sure that we have a really good standardized way of approaching GitOps, something that we all feel good about, we all agree about, and as we build solutions, this is something that people can, hold up and say, okay, is this a GitOps, a true GitOps solution, and can we rely on it, and why should we adopt these principles? What do they mean? And so we're working right now on finalizing Open GitOps version 1.0, and so we've had communication and work and contributions from over 60, maybe 70 companies, and the goal, we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel here. We're bringing in and distilling the best practices that have been around sometimes for a long time, yeah, but putting them all together. And when you put them all together, it actually makes something that is fairly unique and new and powerful, and that's GitOps, right? And so those principles are meant to be simple, straightforward. And I would say that for people, I would view it as a continuum of these standards are powerful. If I adopt all of them, that's how I get the most out of GitOps. But maybe today I haven't adopted any of them. Maybe I can start with the first one, right? I can start with making sure my application and my infrastructure is declarative. Okay, that's going to give me some value, and then I can build on it. I can start doing the rest of these things. And that has a huge impact on organizations. People that adopt GitOps deploy more often, they have fewer regressions, and they have less severe downtime when they do. So it's pretty impactful, and I'm really looking forward to getting that standard out and finalized here by hopefully the end of the year.
Well, we'll look forward to your presenting that final standard at hopefully a live AngelBeat event in early 2022 when all this comes to fruition. If you look at all the changes going out in the world, and I think Codefresh is just riding this wave of cloud growing exponentially, Kubernetes growing exponentially, microservices growing exponentially, DevOps, DevSecOps is growing as an important philosophy. And now GitOps, I wonder in 2023 if there'll be GitSecOps, or maybe you don't even need GitSecOps because GitOps by definition incorporates security. And we may not need yet another acronym for me to keep track of. But all these exciting developments, and I think that Codefresh, that's why we're so excited to have them be part of our AngelBeat community. And I'm personally so confident in promoting their solutions to our attendees is because it is so powerful and riding this wave. And as things are happening real quickly, the CEO, CFO, CEO are driving applications to the cloud. I've heard from many people, everyone needs faster applications, better applications. As licenses become renewable, no one wants to upgrade, or so few people want to upgrade servers on-prem. They want to move it to some of the big three cloud providers. It's a dramatically changing computing world that is very application-centric, and that's why Codefresh will probably be, at many employees, one of the big unicorn IPOs. And even as Dan becomes a major technology mogul, we'll hope he'll still remember the AngelBeat community and join us in the future.
You bet.
All right. Well, this is great stuff, Dan. Thank you all very much. Make sure you can go to codefresh.io if I've got the website correct. You can always watch this on our Angel channel. We've got many of Dan's presentations also available off the slides. And again, at Codefresh.io, I'm sure there's a wealth of white papers, software analysis capabilities on the website as well. All right. Thanks so much, Dan. I'll end this great fireside chat now. Have a good night.